I'm Greg Jarrett, and you are in the strategy room. In what is being called a crushing defeat, Ukrainian soldiers are pulling back and surrendering a key town in the country's east to the rebel forces. Reacting to this news, Russian President Vladimir Putin told reporters that, of course, it's always a hardship when you lose to yesterday's miners or yesterday's tractor drivers, but life is life. It'll surely go on. Well, joining us now with a reaction, a retired Air Force Colonel Cederic Leighton and former Defense Department spokesperson J.D. Gordon. Gentlemen, welcome. Colonel, Moscow-backed rebels are not pulling back. They're not stopping the fighting. In fact, they're doing just the opposite. They are advancing. Is the ceasefire unraveling?
Oh, Greg, I think absolutely. I mean, I look at this and I see shades of Munich 1938 in this whole ceasefire agreement. And it is very clear to me that Vladimir Putin is using the so-called pro-Russian separatists as a way in which he can exercise influence and leverage over Ukraine. And no matter what piece of paper he signs with Angela Merkel or François Hollande, he is going to move forward with his goal, which is basically to put Ukraine in the Russian column and put it in the Russian box so that it is not a threat to him either politically or geographically.
Mr. Gordon, you heard the words of Vladimir Putin. He also is just broadly encouraging the rebels, essentially not so much to honor the ceasefire, he is urging the soldiers to surrender to the rebels, the Ukrainian soldiers. I mean, this does not bode well, does it?
No, Greg, it doesn't. You know, this is a full court press by Russia to take over the eastern part of Ukraine. And I don't think the Russian-backed separatists are going to stop until they have all of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. You know, Russia used to have 148 million people 20 years ago. Today it's 143 million, so the population is declining. However, if you look at demographics, the Muslim population is growing exponentially in Russia. By 2050, Russia could be a Muslim-majority country. It scares Vladimir Putin to death. And that's why he's trying to carve out other pieces of his neighbors where there are Russian speakers. That's why he annexed parts of Georgia in 2008. That's why he's annexing parts of Ukraine now. So the question is, unless the West is willing to stand up to him in concrete terms, what's he going to conquer next?
Colonel, is there some way for the United States and Europe to enforce the ceasefire? And failing that, what should they do?
Well, there is no mechanism within the ceasefire for true enforcement with the exception of using the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. They would send observers, and there's some provisions for it to be observed in that sense. But that's a standard protocol in a lot of these peace agreements. There's no enforcement with teeth. So the way to do this, I think, is to actually arm the Ukrainian government and not only provide them with non-lethal aid, but actually defensive weapons that can really do something in order to help protect at least Western Ukraine and Central Ukraine from any further encroachment by Russians or pro-Russian separatists.
Yeah, I want to ask Mr. Gordon about the weaponry that you just brought up. I mean, the Obama administration has been reticent to supply lethal weaponry. Is that just plain wrong?
Well, certainly the Germans who lead the EU these days don't want any more weapons to go to Ukraine. They don't want the U.S. to give weapons because there will be ramifications that Putin will ramp up actions against the United States and also against Europe if that happens. And also, there's already been 5,000 people killed over this fight for eastern Ukraine. If the U.S. government gives the Ukrainians lethal aid right now, weapons, that death count's going to go up. So I think until Russia stops its advance, the question is, where are they going to stop? It could be counterproductive to give the Ukrainians military aid right now. I'm in favor of giving them military aid, that's for sure. But the Ukrainian government's got to have a strategy that they need to find out where that line is going to be drawn in eastern Ukraine so no more of the country gets annexed. But I think until Russia gets Donetsk and Luhansk, it's about 5 million people, and I think they're going to get both of those too. Until that ends, I don't think giving them weapons right now is the best idea.
Colonel, Vladimir Putin has already annexed the Crimean Peninsula. Is there any doubt that he wants to seize and control all of eastern Ukraine, which would give him incredible leverage over the 45 million people in the country of Ukraine who desperately want to integrate themselves with Europe, not the Kremlin?
Well, I think that's exactly what Putin's plan is. He is very much in the idea of a greater Russia. In fact, he calls these territories New Russia, and he sees them as an inviolable part of the new Russian state that he's creating. And in that vein, what he's trying to do is he's trying to not only annex Crimea like he already did, as you mentioned, but he will also go ahead and, in essence, take these very rich industrial areas and potentially rich industrial areas of eastern Ukraine with that majority Russian population, bring them home into Mother Russia, and then use that as economic leverage against the rest of Ukraine, and in essence cause what we used to call the Finlandization of a place like Ukraine, which means they may be free on paper, but they will go ahead and, in essence, toe the Russian line. They will do things instead of in the pro-European camp, they will do things in the Russian camp, and that's exactly what Vladimir Putin wants.
Mr. Gordon, I'll give you the last word. It would appear that Putin is on the ropes economically. With low oil prices, Russia is really on the precipice of another recession. What about tougher sanctions?
I think the sanctions should continue, but I think what we really have to do is look at the next spot where he might go after, and that's the Baltics. I was just in Finland and the Baltics for 3 weeks in December, speaking at a couple different parliaments and meeting the defense minister of Latvia and other leaders of those 4 countries. And I believe that we have to put more troops in the Baltics. Right now, we only have 600 split between the 3 Baltic countries and Poland. I don't think that's enough, and I think they have to be permanent. I think we should shift some forces from Germany to the Baltics, because right now they're only on these rotational units that can end any time. So we have to look out for the next spot he's going to go. We have to do a better job of working with the Finns and also the Baltic countries to make sure he's not trying to target them next.
J.D. Gordon and Colonel Cederic Leighton, gentlemen, good to see you both. Thanks for being with us.
You bet,
Thanks,
Greg. My pleasure.
For more on the latest in Ukraine, stick with FoxNews.com. I'm Greg Jarrett. Thanks for watching.